everyone, welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to my wrap-up video for my 2012 retrospective that I've been doing on the channel and on Letterboxd. If you want to check out all these reviews for all these 2012 movies, including the ones that I'm not going to mention in this video. I watched a lot of movies last month in prep for this video, just looking at these movies from 10 years ago to see how they look in a modern light. Some movies I've seen a bunch of times, some movies I've seen for the first time. You can check all that out on Letterboxd, where I did full written reviews for all these movies. And you can check out some videos. I did a video on Battleship, did a video on the Avengers, did a video on all the Best Picture nominees. You can check all those out on the channel. I will link them up above in a little playlist that says 2012 Retrospective. Now, without further ado, let's get to my top 10. I'm going to get right to it. There are a lot of honorable mentions, and too many that I just can't name. There are some big blockbusters that I thought about putting on the list, but I wanted to reserve for some other films that I want to talk about. So again, if you want to find out some of my honorable mentions, you can look at the description below, because at my Letterboxd, I have a list for the movies of 2012 where you can see all the movies ranked, all the way from number 1 all the way down to, I think, 58. Spoiler alert, That's My Boy is at number 58, my least favorite film of that year. But if you want to see all the honorable mentions listed there, check out that link. Getting into the top 10 films of 2012. This is nobody else's list but mine, so if you disagree, let me know in the comments respectfully, and let me know what you would have put in this top 10. But this is my list. This is the crop of films that I feel most connected to, whether they have been films that have been in my life for 10 years or been in my life for 10 days. So without further ado, speaking of 10, my number 10, The Impossible. This is a film about a family who is separated after a natural disaster hits them while they're on vacation in Thailand. It stars Naomi Watts, Ewan McGregor, and a young Tom Holland. I actually think of all Tom Holland's performances, he's great in Spider-Man. He did a great job in his lip sync when he was doing Rihanna's Umbrella. But I think this is his best performance. I think he gives one of the best child performances I've ever seen. He really is the emotional core of this film. This movie is very heavy. It's very emotional. It's about a family that is split up by this natural disaster and has to get back to one another. And I won't spoil whether or not they do, but I do think the hopeful, triumphant moments really do soar so high, especially in the midst of all the really dramatic, harsh, tragic moments in this film. I think it's a great blend of both traumatic and triumphant. It is one of those films that is so well designed. All the disaster elements don't feel fake at all. It feels real. It feels like, you know, you're in the moment, in the disaster, but it is mostly a character-based film. It's about the human spirit and what we do when we are put at our lowest and in our most vulnerable state. And I think that is a really, really powerful film that I really hope more people check out. At number 9, I have my favorite feature-length animated film of the year, and that is Wreck-It Ralph. Wreck-It Ralph is one of those films, I don't really have to tell you how great it is because most of you already know. It is a very popular film, but I did have to put it in my top 10 because it is one of my favorite Disney movies, especially of the last decade. Wreck-It Ralph is a pretty straightforward hero's journey story, but I think because it is so straightforward, the filmmakers could dive even deeper into the mythology, into the lore, into the world building, into the characters, into the animation itself, and I think that's really where this film soars. Yes, it is a straightforward story, but it is a story that is universal. It really does appeal to everyone. It is an emotional story. It is an impactful story, but the colors, the world building, I love all the creativity that was put into setting all this in one arcade and to show how different games and different game characters interact with one another, how you travel to different games. I could just spend an hour watching all the different ins and outs of this game central station. I just love the world building in this so much. I really do think all the characters are well designed. They're well performed. Alan Tudyk as King Candy, one of the all-time great villain voice performances. I think Wreck-It Ralph has it all. It has every single beat you would want from a Disney movie. Is it a little conventional in some places? Yes. But is it enjoyable? Is it one of the best of those conventional choices? Absolutely. At number 8, this may not appear on many people's lists, but it appears on mine. I couldn't put a top 10 together without my favorite comedy of 2012, Ted. I know, Ted, that raunchy movie about that little bear who smokes pot with his best friend Mark Wahlberg. Yes, Ted. I think Ted is one of the funniest movies of the last 10 years. It is a movie that I have a lot of nostalgia for. My brother and I tricked my dad into taking us to see this at midnight on its premiere. He didn't know what he was getting into. He thought it'd be like some Winnie the Pooh or Paddington-like movie about a little bear and his best friend. Little did he know that one of the opening shots would be of Ted and Johnny smoking a bowl on the couch. But hey, it really made for a quite enjoyable movie experience, and it's a movie that my brother, my dad, and I quote all the time.
You can't get me thunder because you're just God's farts. Hey, Laurie, can you set the alarm for 11 a.m.? I got a lot of stuff to do tomorrow.
I think it really does have a sweet emotional core. I think outside of the really crass, funny exterior is a warm, cuddly inside, just like Ted himself. I think there's a really great sentiment to be shared in this film about friendship and what it means to mature and how we, kind of evolve or devolve our friendships based on the different paths we go in life and what we decide to take with us and what we decide to leave behind and the growth that we must explore with one another, with our relationships, with our friendships, but also with ourselves and our own personal journeys. And I think Ted actually does that very well. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it is mine, and I would not be able to put this top 10 list together without it. At number 7, Life of Pi. I did talk about this movie on my Picture This episode, talking about the Best Picture nominees, so I won't get too far into this story, but it is about a boy who is basically stranded. He is shipwrecked after his family is basically relocating all these zoo animals across seas, and he ends up with some of the zoo animals in his lifeboat. And it is a very, very emotional watch, watching this kid have to fend for himself while dealing with this tiger who's on board with him. I think it's a really great Lost at Sea film. I think it is one of the best to do the Lost at Sea thing. It does get into a lot of themes about religion and higher spirits and stuff like that, but I think it is a universal film that anyone can enjoy because it doesn't necessarily preach one specific religion, but rather the idea of just having something to fight for, having something to live for, to just make it one day longer. I really do appreciate that about Life of Pi, that I could watch this and anyone could watch this with whatever religious beliefs they have in their mind and still be able to relate to it on a just universally humane level. I think the beginning is a little slow with some of the exposition, but once we hit the actual shipwreck and from that point on, when he's on the boat with the tiger to the end, I just think it's a thrilling experience. I also think it's the most beautiful looking movie of 2012 and maybe of the last decade. I think it is stunning to look at. It's just really one of those films that hits all the boxes. It's emotional, it's scary at times, it is, freeing, it's spiritual, but it's also very, very well designed. I could look at every frame of this movie for hours. I could put it up on the wall. It is such a gorgeous film. At number 6, if Ted was my favorite comedy, this is probably the best comedy of 2012. It is Moonrise Kingdom. I think Wes Anderson, first of all, his aesthetic, I love it. I love Wes Anderson's aesthetic. I think it's perfect. I love the soft color palettes. I love how everything really supports the story and that quirky tone that he gives every film of his. Because this film is about two kids who basically run away together to start their own life. And, watching this from an adult's perspective, you know that they're probably not going to succeed in their entire mission. They're going to have to come home at some point. But this film does not judge the kids for the experiences they have in this film. In fact, it actually embraces childhood and embraces what it means to be a kid, having these really monumental coming of age experiences for the first time, having your first kiss, your first dance, your first fight. And I do love how Wes Anderson's production design really does emphasize how much larger than life everything is in context in comparison to its smaller subjects. I love how the teepees and the boats and everything around them feels so much bigger than them because this is a film about a smaller perspective, a younger perspective. And I love how the production design kind of emphasizes that by being a little bit bigger than the subjects it's portraying. I really love this film. I think it's very well thought out, both in its script and its visuals. I think it is one of the most Wes Anderson-y movies that Wes Anderson has made, and I mean that as the utmost compliment. At number 5, I have Looper. This is actually a first-time watch. I hadn't seen this for 10 years, and I'm kicking myself because I wish I had seen this 10 years ago, because if I had seen this 10 years ago, I would have been watching this a lot more on loop in the past 10 years. I really think this movie is freaking amazing. I think Rian Johnson just has such a knack for storytelling that is twisty and turny, that you're engaged every second of the way, but you're never confused. And I love that about Looper. I love how there are little threads that are planted, little seeds that are planted along the way, but at the end it all kind of comes together in one emotional cathartic whole. And I think Looper is just one of his most impressive bouts of storytelling. He's done it with Knives Out, Last Jedi, and Looper, and his TV work. I just think he's one of the most interesting storytellers out there. I think his stories are always intriguing. His characters are always intriguing. I love the emotional depths he goes in his films. It's a pretty damn good film. It's a sci-fi film. I haven't seen it a bunch of times like some of these other films, so I can't go too far in depth because I want to watch it a few more times before I can give my complete thoughts on it, but it definitely left a big enough impact for me to put in my top 5. At number 4, another very cathartic watch, Django Unchained by Quentin Tarantino. This was actually the first Tarantino movie I ever saw, so I didn't expect all the blood, guts, pulp, all that stuff, but it is very trademark Tarantino. I think Tarantino is firing on all cylinders when it comes to his style in this, but he's also firing on all cylinders when it comes to his writing and his characterization. I think the characters in this are some of his most memorable he's ever created. I think it's also enhanced by the performances. Kerry Washington, Jamie Foxx, Samuel L. Jackson, of course Christoph Waltz, who won the Academy Award, and Leonardo DiCaprio, who probably should have been nominated and maybe even should have won the Academy Award. I don't know how you don't nominate Leo. He's playing one of the most despicable characters I've ever seen. And so those moments where Django really has moments of catharsis and takes his revenge out on these people who have wronged him, they're some of the most epic moments in cinematic history for me. I mean, this movie was so life-changing because it introduced me to one of my favorite directors, but it also was one of the first films I saw at that age that was really mature and dark and R-rated, but filled with so many different variables and tones that I just ate it all up and was like, give me more of this type of cinema. So Django Unchained, huge recommendation. Not like I have to recommend it because everyone loves it, but I do love it and it belongs on this list. At number 3, the Best Picture winner, Argo. I really find this one also very thrilling, very cathartic. This is a thriller about a group of people who make a fake film crew in order to rescue some hostages from Iran. It is a true story. I think from start to end, I was always engrossed in what was going on, not just because the filmmaking was always keeping me at the edge of my seat and on my toes, but because the characters were so relatable to where I wanted every single one of them to succeed. The ones who went to Iran, the ones who were being rescued from Iran, and the ones who were still staying at home who were helping the mission go along. I just really felt empathy for all these characters, and I think that is one of the most important things for a movie about a giant group of people, you know, a rescue mission. You really want to see the people being rescued as more than just victims. You want them to have actual well-rounded personalities, and I think Argo does a good job in doing that. I think it is a really, really great, thrilling watch. I think Ben Affleck deserved a Best Director nomination for it. I'm surprised he didn't get nominated, especially since it went on to win the big award of the night, but I'm glad the Academy did give it to Argo because I think Argo is a really, really great film. At number 2, a very sad watch. It is Amour. Now, this movie is not an easy watch. I actually don't watch this movie very often, but I think it's because it's so good I don't watch it this often. It is about husband and wife dealing with the wife's sudden stroke and what that brings to their relationship and the people around them as she descends deeper into her illness. It is a very harrowing watch. I think Michael Haneke, the director, didn't shy away from anything in this film, and I actually appreciate that because sometimes films are used for escapism and to kind of entertain us more than anything, but this film really exists as a mirror to society and to say that some things are inevitable in life, whether or not you were experiencing it firsthand or in relation to someone else. If someone else you know is aging, I mean, aging is a part of life, and I think that's what makes this film so jarring and so scary, is because it's so honest. And it doesn't shy away from the tough and difficult decisions that family members must make in the wake of a really sudden and devastating illness, but also the firsthand experience of what that means, what it means to experience that. And Emmanuel Riva does such a good job in capturing that emotional state as the film progresses. When people ask me what the scariest movie I've ever seen is, usually Amour comes to mind. It's either Amour or Nightmare on Elm Street. And they both share one very, very similar element, and that is inevitability. In Nightmare on Elm Street, the reason why it's so scary is because all these characters eventually need to sleep. Sleep is inevitable. Everyone sleeps, which makes it terrifying that the villain only attacks in sleep. Same with Amour. Aging, it's inevitable. And I think that's what makes it so scary, is the inevitability that everyone grows older. And with age, especially at the specific age that Amour is depicting, there are some real horrors that come with that. And as a person watching, it is devastating. It is scary. It is one of those haunting films that I always tell people, like, if you want one of the most, like, raw, depressing watches, because sometimes people need that. Sometimes you need to just put on a depressing movie for a depressing, rainy day. And you know, this is one of those movies that'll certainly do the trick if you want to get deep in your feels. But I do warn people, you know, you're not going to find much joy in a movie that is titled Love. Amour doesn't mean love. You're not going to find too much joy in it. It is just a big heaping plate of sadness. But it's sadness that is designed, written, and performed so exquisitely that I couldn't put it anywhere below 2 because it is that good. At number 1, I have a bit of a tie. I'm not going to put this movie at number 1 because it is a short film, but one of my favorite films of 2012 that I'm going to make my number 1A is Paper Man. This is actually the short film that showed before Wreck-It Ralph. I think Paper Man is a perfect film. I think it really captures the sweet wholesomeness of love at first sight. I'm such a sap when it comes to shit like that, like love at first sight and seeing someone and the fluttery butterflies that come with it and a crush. I love that shit. I adore it. I think Paper Man does it so well. The use of black and white and the 2D animation. I mean, can we bring back more 2D animation, please, in these bigger studios? Because it's just so well drawn, so well presented. These characters, they don't even speak in this short film. It's only 10 minutes long, but I feel like I know their whole journeys. I know all their emotions they're feeling. There's a lot of romance, there's some quirky comedy, and there are also some fantasy elements. This is a movie where paper airplanes literally come to life to push these two lovers together, and it's just such a sweet film. I don't think it needs to be any longer because it's perfect in what it is. It's a perfect little bundle of joy. If you haven't seen this film, it's on Disney Plus. Go watch it. Takes 10 minutes. Pause the video now, come back in 10 minutes, and I promise you will find it so sweet. It's one of my favorite movies of this year and one of my favorite little animated shorts ever. At number one, though, the real number one is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This is a film that I first saw when I was in high school. I think that's why I revere it so much, because this was a film that I kind of saw a lot of myself in. Growing up as like this awkward teenager who had some friends but always felt like he was a bit of an outsider, even in his social groups. And I do think that this film really captures that. But like some of the other films I've talked about, like Moonrise Kingdom, it never judges its lead subjects. It instead kind of embraces that awkwardness and shows that, you're right, people are coming right around the corner. You just got to find them and give it time, and good things will happen. And this movie does take some really dark, dramatic turns that I can't personally relate to, but a lot of the other stuff, just dealing with the high school experience, I really related to. And I watched this film several times as I grew alongside it and was able to see myself and my own story mirrored within it. The feeling of, a first kiss, the feeling of finding those friends that are going to be friends for a lifetime, the feeling of being able to belt out your favorite David Bowie song from your roof of your car while driving through a tunnel. Yes, I have done it. I don't recommend it. Don't try this at home, kids. But I have done that too. This film is just such a very personal film to me. And I think of all these films, when I try to think about which is the best, there are a lot of films I can think of. More, Django, Argo, Looper. A lot of these are could be the best of the year, but I think for my favorite film of the year, the one that speaks to me the most, I think Perks of Being a Wallflower just understands a very specific experience of teenage life that I experience, that a lot of other kids experience, and I think that is what made it so emotional and so impactful for me. It has great characters, great dialogue, amazing soundtrack moments. I mean, come on, Eileen. It's such a good song. Oh, so many good songs in this thing. It's just one of those movies that feels like comfort food, but also a really great validation that, life can get tricky, but at the end of the day, it's going to be all right, because in the end, we are all infinite. I know that was sappy, but yeah, it's true. This movie is a really great kind of security blanket for me. It's a warm hug, but also a consoling one when I need it the most. And this film is going to be a part of my life, I feel. For the rest of my life, it's going to be a special part of my life. It is just one of the best films I've seen in the last 10 years, and it comes in here at number one.
And in this moment, I swear, we are infinite.
So that was my full ranking of the top 10 films of 2012. Again, so many great films. It was hard to narrow it down to just 10 plus Paper Man. But if you want to check out the full ranking of all the 2012 films, check out my link below to my Letterboxd list. And of course, check back on my Letterboxd for all the reviews for all these movies. I spent a lot of time watching these movies in preparation for this video and for other videos on the channel. So thank you guys so much for checking those out. I will be back again next year to do 2013. But until then, this was 2012. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching, and share your list below. What are your favorite movies from 10 years ago? Are there movies you haven't seen from 10 years ago that you want to check out now that you might have heard about on this list? Are there movies that you keep coming back to from 10 years ago? And what movies of this year do you think will be on your list 10 years from now? Thank you guys so much for joining on this retrospective. That was 2012. I was Dylan. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.